The headlines today include the EU's call for international investigation into all and any abuses that have taken place within the Tigray region, Tigrayan Muslims in Ramadan still fasting amid starvation, and the Eritrean government and Ethiopia's Afar region sign a pact to attack Tigray. As we move on to the main stories for today, the EU calls for the international investigation into all and any abuses within the Tigray region. The European Union said the international investigation by the United Nations is urgently needed to clarify the facts contained in the recent report by Amnesty International as well as Human Rights Watch. The two NGOs published a report last Wednesday assuring that the security forces of the Ethiopian regions of Amhara and their partners are carrying out a campaign of ethnic cleansing in neighboring Tigray with abuses that amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity as whole. The Organizations for World Peace says the Ethiopian government has a hand in ethnic cleansing in western Tigray. The Organization for World Peace says the government has the hand in ethnic cleansing, and in a statement released on Saturday in which it denounced the continued human rights abuses against Tigrayans by the Amhara security forces aligned with civilian authorities appointed to occupy western Tigray. Some of the specific crimes against humanity being committed in Tigray since November of 2020 are murder, rape, mass detentions, forcible movement, and other ethnic crimes along this line. The statement said the Ethiopian government is complicit with the actions, that they're not intervening, while also limiting what the world is seeing of these atrocities. These actions have recently come to the attention of the international community, prompting outrages against the Ethiopian government. According to the Organization for World Peace, the war on Tigray draws eerie and frightening similarities to past conflicts where ethnic cleansing has been the ultimate goal. The statement noted that most recently what happened in Rwanda is an example of what happens when governing bodies do not step in early enough to stop this cleansing from continuing on. 6 former diplomats to Ethiopia call for urgent negotiations to end the Tigray war, for Eritrean troops to withdraw as well. The former U.S. ambassadors in charge of affairs to Ethiopia released a statement in which they urged all warring sides in the country to implement the humanitarian truce. The diplomats also encouraged the parties to enter an ongoing process of dialogue to address the outstanding issues which contributed to this ongoing conflict. The statement stressed that if this opportunity is lost and if the conflict is resumed, we see no advantage to be gained by any of the combatants, and only result would be death, destruction, and even more suffering. They called on armed groups, including the Eritrean armed forces, to expeditiously return to their home territories. The former ambassadors emphasized that the situation in Tigray requires the most urgent attention, but also acknowledged that there are serious humanitarian and human rights issues in other regions such as Afar, Amhara, Oromia, and Benshangul that also need consideration and assistance from the Ethiopian government as well as the international body. In a related news, Africa analyst Martin Plott also called for the implementation of humanitarian truce to avoid impending humanitarian catastrophe. On the 25th of March, the Tigrayan forces declared that they would respect a cessation of hostilities agreement reached between them and the Ethiopian government as long as the sufficient aid was delivered to their war-scarred northern region within reasonable time. Martin Plott, African analyst and former BBC World Service Africa editor, told Fair Observer's Insight that the truce is necessary to avoid human catastrophe due to starvation.
This is the first real breakthrough in the negotiating process that we've had since the war began in November 2020. So there's been terrible, bitter months in which there have been huge loss of life. And the estimates are anything up to 500,000 people who have died, either from the conflict or from starvation in Tigray, because the whole of Tigray is surrounded by enemies, either the Eritreans to the north or the Ethiopians to the south, east and west. And it is vital that supplies get through. They need something like 100 trucks a day. They've had 100 trucks in the last, 6 weeks. There's just absolutely starvation is now breaking through in Tigray, and it's desperately needed.
Martin also said the Ethiopian and Eritreans have used starvation as a weapon of war, and the total blockade that they have imposed on Tigray is exacting a heavy humanitarian toll on the population. He had this to add.
The situation is terrible. As ever, it is always the very young and the very old who die first. The problem is that we have no absolute certainty about what is going on because the government of Ethiopia and of Eritrea have refused to allow any journalists into the front lines, even on the Ethiopian or Eritrean side, let alone into Tigray itself. All the communications are cut to Tigray, banking services are cut, there's no way of paying for anything, all fuel supplies that are going in have been prevented. So it's almost like a sealed off area, and nobody knows really what is going on, but we do get whispers, and the whispers are terrible.
In a related news, Director of Africa Programs at the U.S. Institute of Peace, Susan Stignan, emphasized the importance of an immediate humanitarian response to all of the mass starvations. She says, although the ceasefire in Ethiopia is a step in the direction of peace, people can't eat a truce declaration, she wrote on the USIP official Twitter account. Horn of Africa analyst Rashid Abdi, on his part, wrote on his Twitter account that the UNSC had two hard choices on Ethiopia set up as an alternative internationally protected aid corridor to Tigray via Sudan's Kassala Red Sea and state of airdrops as well. Rashid Abdi wrote on his official Twitter account, depending on Addis to feed starving Tigray has become futile. It's time to think the unimaginable. The fasting of Ramadan amid starvation has proved extremely difficult for all the Muslims in Tigray currently. Tigray TV aired this report based on the plight of one Muslim family in Ma'ala, the capital of Tigray region in northern Ethiopia. Tamit Bairu presents this report.
Millions of people in Tigray are suffering due to the ongoing siege starvation. Tigrayan Muslims are going through untold suffering this month of Ramadan. The plight of Sheikh Kahsai Abarra's family in Ma'ala, the capital of Tigray region in northern Ethiopia, is typical of many other Muslim families in the blockaded region of 7 million people. It has been 5 years since he became bedridden after he lost his eyesight. He has also diabetes and hypertension. Things have gone worse now. He doesn't even control his urine. Rahmato Muhammad Said is the wife of Sheikh Kahsai. She started selling spices to support her family after her husband became bedridden. But sudden misfortune in the family, the death of her daughter, accident that disabled her son, and the worsening situation of her husband forced her to stop her trade. We are in the middle of Ramadan fasting. We have been subsiding on food provided to us by Good Samaritan relatives. The last 2 days we ate what my daughter-in-law shared with us. This is our bleak situation. The family members lamented that Good Samaritans who used to help them have exhausted their supplies as the siege continues unabated.
As this humanitarian crisis continues, the Eritrean government has continued its unholy alliance with Ethiopian regional forces to continue their attack on Tigray. The Afar Federalist Diaspora Coordination Committee disclosed that Eritrean General Humed Karkari and Afar Regional State President Awel Arba have signed a military agreement on the 7th of April 2022. The committee wrote on its official Twitter account they are fully positioned to launch a new offensive against Tigray. The Afar Federalist Diaspora Coordination Committee also called on the international community to act now to prevent more bloodshed within Ethiopia. The Oromo Federalist Congress on the Ethiopian government and Oromo Liberation Army said to end the war. The Executive Committee of the Oromo Federalist Congress today issued a statement on the current state of affairs, including the government's renewed offensive against Oromo Liberation Army and the incursion of the Amhara forces into the Oromia region. The OFC urged the government to refrain from its rhetoric of eliminating the armed opposition, adding that this new military campaign will only dampen the newly opened narrow window for peace and put Oromia and the entire country in a precarious situation. The OFC also accused armed forces originating from the Amhara region of having declared war and trespassed on the recognized administrative boundaries of Oromia with the aim of expanding their territory. The executive committee also alluded to the escalating cost of living, asserting that the main reason for the high cost of living was the fact that the country was in a state of civil war, which, according to the statement, has disrupted the peace as well as stability of the country as whole, and has even slowed down domestic and foreign trade as well. The statement reiterated that the parties believe that only solution to the country's insecurity and high cost of living is to end this ongoing civil war in various regions through dialogue alone. Mahari Tadella Maru, a professor at the European Universities Institute, said the regime in Addis Ababa is plunging the countries further and further into oblivion with new rounds of devastating military operations within the Oromia region. He says on his official Twitter account that this military adventurism plunges the Horn of Africa into humanitarian catastrophe when more than 20 million people are stricken by drought. Our final update for today: an ongoing drought kills over 1 million cattle within Ethiopia's Somali region. More than 1 million cattle have died due to the ongoing severe drought in Ethiopia's Somali region. And the drought, which is said to be the worst drought that has hit Ethiopia in the southern eastern Somali region in 40 years, has severely affected the region's pastoralist community. The United Nations World Food Program had recently warned that the shortages of water and pasture are devastating livelihoods, forcing families from their homes across the regions in southern and southeastern Ethiopia as well. The WFP has said last week that the livestock are dying, crops are failing, and an estimated 5.7 million people wake up hungry every single day in the southern and southeastern parts of Ethiopia as the Horn of Africa grapples with the most severe drought since 1981. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.